The real estate market post-coronavirus. The real estate market before the coronavirus was on a tear. The February 2020 national median listing prices were up 3.9% year over year, and prices were re-accelerating primarily due to low supply in many parts of the country. The spring market is always the busiest for real estate. Spring of 2020 was looking like it was going to get white hot. With record low unemployment, low rates, and tight inventory, the market was postured to post yet another great year. That, of course, was before the coronavirus pandemic. The catchphrase, unprecedented times, also applies to the real estate market. New construction had a dramatic 30% drop in April from March. Home sales also dropped in April to 17.8% and were down 17.2% year over year, the lowest level in 9 years. In no other time in recent history has the U.S. real estate market been affected in such a short period of time. The statewide lockdowns withdrew many home sellers off the market and even prevented them from listing their homes. New listings declined by 28% compared with just a year ago. The further drop in inventory has left even fewer options to choose from, causing a current frenzy for those few homes left on the market. Buyers that had long been waiting to buy are now competing with more home buyers, creating many multiple offer situations. In many real estate markets, we have even seen an uptick in prices. But how long will this last? What will the real estate market look like in 2, 5, and even 10 years from now? And most importantly, when is it a good time to buy or sell? Unlike the stock market, real estate is much slower in price correction. In the last recession, it took real estate 5 years to reach its bottom. The rapid drop in inventory has caused an anomaly. Though many would-be home buyers have lost employment, many sellers have also pulled their homes off the market at the same time. The current situation has prevented the real estate market from proper price discovery. Price discovery is the process of figuring out what an asset like real estate is worth. Investors or buyers often look at previously sold comparables to determine the current value. In residential real estate, an appraisal is done by comparing previously sold homes with the subject property being appraised. The challenge today is homes are being compared to sold comparables when unemployment was at a historic low. In April, the unemployment rate jumped to 14.7%, a number not seen since the Great Depression. Many agree most jobs will return, but the truth is, no one knows for sure how long this will take. The virus has caused panic and uncertainty all over the world. Usually when people are uncertain of job security and pay, they restrain themselves from making major expenses like houses. Experts think it might be several months or even years before we see a normal stable market. Other experts believe that the pandemic will cause many foreclosures and short sales. The increase in supply may or may not affect prices, all depending on the scale and length of the crisis. If a second wave of the virus is even deadlier than the first, it could cause a second lockdown, and that will put markets into a spin. The two major variables are the spread of the virus post-lockdown and the legislation in Washington. Congress and Washington have done an extraordinary job so far. They have acted quicker than ever before and provided a backstop to all markets. The CARES Act that passed in March froze evictions and foreclosures and gave homeowners the option to put mortgages in forbearances for a whole year. The number of homeowners in mortgage forbearance has now reached 4.7 million. This is 9% of all active borrowers nationwide and represents a little more than $1 trillion in unpaid principal. This has given a backstop to the real estate market, preventing a possible tsunami of foreclosures and evictions from people unable to pay for housing. The government acted quickly to prevent major housing distress while the deadly pandemic continued. But the historic legislation from Congress doesn't come without risk or consequences. As the saying goes, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The forbearance will likely save a lot of homeowners, but it will also delay the inevitable. Those that will no longer be able to afford their homes after the assistance period is over are likely to lose their homes. You can structure debt and even put the months missed at the end of the mortgage, but if jobs are not returned, there will be no income to pay for the house that once was affordable. A look in the real estate market in 1 to 2 years. Housing is a different situation than it was in the mid-2000s. Unlike 2008, today the real estate market is far from being overbuilt. Housing in 2006 had multiple double-digit appreciating years from 03 to 06. Though markets have surpassed its 2006 highs, now it has taken every bit of a decade to get there. The carnage of 08 seems very unlikely to happen again, but the stress will vary in different parts of the country. I expect some states to be affected more than others. These are states that also have large amounts of second homes and many short-term rentals. The drying up of revenue from a lack of tourism and unemployment will put many homeowners in a tough decision. This will likely cause variations in foreclosures in some parts of the country more than others. Homeowners' ability to claim forbearance will likely cushion the real estate market from a rapid drop in real estate prices. The increase in home inventory and high unemployment will likely put heavy downward pressure on home prices, an environment similar to 2008 and 2012. During this period, I expect stable prices. If the market is accompanied by a lowered amount of buyers, it is likely to maintain relative stable prices. A changing culture will also change home requirements, changing the housing industry forever. Many more Americans are now working from home, getting many of their necessities delivered, and staying far away from heavily dense areas. Americans purchase or sell homes when life changes causes them to have new housing requirements. Young families buy when the family size increases, and older Americans usually sell when the family size decreases. Things like office space and workout areas might be a requirement for many future consumers. Large companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Google have extended work from home until the end of the year, and many even stated that working from home will likely stay even after the crisis is over. This has many people rethinking housing. In a recent interview with CNBC, Redfin's CEO stated that in their latest gathering of data, they saw a shift to more rural parts of the country. This all makes sense if many Americans will no longer have to commute in or out of work. Eliminating commute time would only give Americans the additional free time and making distance from work less in importance than the pre-crisis. In a recent interview, the CEO of Facebook stated that work from home would now give them the ability to scout the whole nation for talent to hire. A change in culture and work conditions will cause many Americans to home search further away from the city. This will not only keep them away from the hardest areas hit by the pandemic, but it will also likely lower their tax burden. Taxes and cost living will likely gain importance when it is time to pay off the country's new debt. The period following the pandemic will likely be the restructuring stage, where we will see what is important for homeowners in a new environment, and most importantly, what they will be willing to pay for housing. A reshuffling in employment and supply chains will likely take some time though. The real estate market might also take a few years to reflect on consumers' wants and needs and price adjustments accordingly. Even if we come out of the pandemic in a better than expected condition, the debt of the nation absorbed during the pandemic is here to stay. $9 trillion now went onto the balance sheet, over 100% of GDP, a number not seen since World War II. I expect home prices to have a price correction period or even a momentary stall of prices during this stage. What is the real estate market going to look like in 5 to 10 years? So many factors can impact the real estate market in a decade or so. Some problems previously seen and some problems previously unknown. The very best of minds see many different possibilities and many different outcomes. But the truth is, no one knows what's yet to come. Ray Dalio, the famous hedge fund manager, believes we are living in an economic period resembling the 1930s through 1940s. This period just after the great stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression that followed. The country had a large wealth divide and was experiencing booms and busts similar to today. The period 1930 through 1940 saw exponential money printing. President FDR also had many economic reforms, like the New Deal.
I say to you now that from this date on, the 18th Amendment is doomed. I pledge myself to a new deal for the American people.
President Roosevelt also moved to put a rest to one of the most devised cultural issues of the 1920s. He signed a bill to legalize and manufacture the sale of alcohol, like marijuana today. Real estate, along with the rest of the economy, was in a deflationary condition, a situation that caused many bank runs and poor consumer confidence and very low levels of currency velocity, a metric known to be critically important for economic recovery. Although real estate prices increased in nominal terms adjusted for inflation, they actually went down. The second period economists believe that this period resembles is the stagflation period of the 1970s.
The third indispensable element in building the new prosperity is closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world.
The term stagflation was coined because it was a period of stagnant economic growth, high unemployment, and high inflation. This period in U.S. history saw very high levels of inflation due to international trade tension, low economic output, and high public debt due to the Vietnam War. The inflation period was caused by the dollar losing value overseas and even caused France to request gold for dollars in 1971 from the New York Federal Reserve Bank. The inflationary period of 1970 saw real estate prices rise well above the inflation rate, but eventually had a meeting with high interest rates in the early 80s in an attempt to control high inflation. Finally, I would like to point out the biggest difference between our current time and those two other times in history, our possible geographical changes and demographical changes. Our geographical area on where we choose to live could change due to the acceleration in remote work, e-learning, and convenient delivery services. Americans might choose to lower their cost of living by moving further away from cities. As we mentioned earlier, this would cause low demand in cities and would put downward pressures on prices in urban areas. The biggest and likely most dramatic effect on real estate prices is demographics. The two largest American generations generations, the baby boomers and their children or grandchildren, millennials, are both likely to experience life-changing events that will change their housing needs in the next decade. The millennials have been living in the city, but in the next decade, millennials will be approaching the average age of marriage and most likely will have children. More and more millennials are likely to search for a home to raise their children in nearby cities and suburbs. This is also at the same time that the baby boomer generation will be retiring and downsizing their home. About 30 million baby boomers are currently over 65 years old, but by 2030, about 80 million baby boomers will be over 65 years old. Roughly 1 in 3 homes in the U.S. are owned by someone the age of 60 or older. As baby boomers reach their golden years, a growing number of homeowners across the country will pass away. And with their passing, these seniors will leave behind millions of homes. And millions of more boomers will choose to sell their homes as they downsize or move to retirement living facilities. Collectively, the vast inventory of homes owned by older Americans is worth an estimated $13.5 trillion, equivalent to the value of nearly 3/4 of the nation's annual economic output. Crippled with student debt and financially behind due to the fallout of multiple recessions, it's difficult for millennials to save for the skyrocketing cost of housing. First-time homebuyers today will pay 39% more than the first-time homebuyers did nearly 40 years ago. In comparison, millennials own 4% of the real estate value in the U.S. at their age. Baby boomers own 32% of the country's real estate value. With record lower starter home supply across the country, change will likely be due to one or two things. Either millennials will need to have a rapid growth in income allowing them to afford the boomers' McMansions in suburbia, or boomers will have to sell at a deep discount. The largest divide is the wealth gap between the two generations. Over 60% of the boomers' wealth is held in real estate. And with fixed income returns in the lowest in over 50 years, boomers are most likely going to have to sell to lower expenses and liquidate assets. Thank you for watching.